Welcome and thank you for joining us for our Zoom conference titled Bail Reform. Everyone at Safe and Just Michigan is thrilled you are participating. We have muted your microphones to ensure that everyone can hear the panel, but please ask any questions you have using the chat function on Zoom. Thanks to all of our co-sponsors and to our national co-sponsor, Dream Corp Justice. I would now like to turn things over to our moderator for today's discussion, Josh Ho, Policy Analyst at Safe and Just Michigan. Josh?
Thanks so much, Rick. Before I introduce our panelists and start asking questions, I want to welcome a special guest, Twyla Carter, who's the National Policy Director at the Bail Project. She's joining us to say a few words and welcome everyone to this discussion. Twyla?
Thank you so much, Josh. Hi, everyone. I also want to welcome you to Safe and Justice Michigan's virtual day of empathy. On any given day, nearly 500,000 people sit in jail even though they have not been convicted of a crime. And people in pretrial detention make up more than 2/3 of our jail population. They are presumed innocent under the law, yet they languish in jail because they don't have enough money to pay bail and buy their freedom. This two-tier system criminalizes poverty and is a structural linchpin of mass incarceration and racial inequality. It affects entire communities, devastates families for generations, and guts the presumption of innocence. Freedom should be free. Thank you so much for joining us for an important discussion about bail reform.
Thanks so much, Twyla. And now let's introduce the panel. Joining us to discuss bail and bail reform today are Sarah, who's experienced our bail system in Michigan firsthand, Asia Johnson, who's the communications associate at the Bail Project, Ellie Savit, who's the new prosecuting attorney in Washtenaw County, Michigan, and who ran his campaign a lot based on bail reform, on a platform of bail reform, and Phil Skaggs, who's a legislative assistant in Representative David LaGrand's office. Representative LaGrand introduced a series of bail reform bills last session, and as I understand it, is likely to reintroduce them soon. Let's start with Sarah. Sarah, you experienced this system firsthand. Can you share what you went through so that everyone understands how the system works in practice for real people? What did you experience?
Hello, my name is Sarah. I was arrested in June of 2020, and I was held at First Westland, like the public jail, and I was there for about 3 days. And I didn't really eat anything. I drank only juice. I didn't drink water for about 3 days. And I ended up going to the hospital before I was transferred to Wayne County. Once I was transferred, it was, I guess, a little better. I had a TV, so there was that at least, but I was 17. So I was on a ward completely alone. And due to the pandemic, I had to stay in my cell for about 23 hours out of the day. I had about 1 hour to come out, and it had to be before 12 o'clock at noon. I was very lonely, and I'm a very outgoing, very talkative person. I had no one to talk to. I had nothing to really think about except trying to go home. And it took a really long time, in my opinion. It may not be that long for anyone else, but I was in jail for about 3 months before I finally got to go home. And the only reason I got to go home was because I finally got in contact with the Bail Project. And if it wasn't for that, I would probably still be sitting in the cell right now.
A lot of people, I know when I was incarcerated, I had the same problem with basically being locked down for 23 hours a day for a while. And it impacts all of us quite a bit. But the other people we don't talk about is how much it impacts our families. Could you talk a little bit about how that process impacted your family in addition to you?
Well, my mother went through a lot more than anyone else, I believe. Not only did she suffer financially, but mentally, she probably won't ever be the same. I don't think any mother wants to watch their daughter go to jail, or even worse, watch your daughter sit in jail because you can't afford to get them out. I'm sorry. My mom had to leave her apartment because of where we were living. Where we were living was where I got in trouble. So she couldn't live there anymore. And she had to stay with one of my cousins for the entire summer until I got out. And then we stayed with my cousin for about 2 more months after my release. My mom, I'm sorry.
Oh, don't worry about it. Take your time.
My mom was starting to feel depressed, and she was just very, very sad that I was in there. And every time I talked to her on the phone, I could hear it in her voice that she just wanted to get me out, and she couldn't, and she didn't know what to do. And as heartbreaking as it is for me, I know it hurt her and it hurt my little sister more. And the fact that we couldn't afford to get me out was the thing that hurt the most, because it just felt like, even though I was sitting somewhere for something that really I did not do, it was like my freedom just did not matter. And the whole time I was in there, I just wanted to let her know that it wasn't her fault, and that I didn't blame her, and that I didn't blame her for not being able to get me out. She even had to spend about $900 to get my car out of the impound because the police took it when they arrested me. Even though I was not driving at that time, I don't know, I guess they needed it to search for evidence or whatever the case may be. It took $900, and that $900 plus what my mother had to spend to make sure I could eat and talk to her, it was a huge toll, and I really don't wish that on anyone.
I think, most people, when they hear about bail, don't necessarily put two and two together, that it's people who have only been accused of a crime, not people who've actually been found guilty of a crime. And so people are basically stuck in jail without being able to fight their case, except from in jail. Is there something else you'd like maybe that people to know who don't know much about bail or pretrial incarceration to know that they might not know now?
Yes. One thing I do want everyone to know: if you are ever held pre-sentencing, just keep your head up. You are not alone. There's somebody who is out here fighting for you. The Bail Project has been amazing, and they are here for not just me, they're here for everyone. It doesn't matter your gender, your race, your religion, whatever the case may be. If you need help, you can reach out. Never give up, and do not let being in those four walls, do not let that take your mentality to a bad place. I know that everybody who is locked up right now is not locked up because they did something. A lot of the times, people are locked up because they were a victim of circumstance. They were a victim of the system. And being a victim of a system is not an easy thing. But when you get into this system, you just have to keep your mind on the straight path. And the second you have the chance to do better, take that opportunity and run with it.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Asia, you work with people who can't afford bail all the time. And like me, you've experienced the system firsthand as well. Is there anything you'd like to add about your experiences firsthand working with the Bail Project?
It's nearly impossible to convey, and Sarah just did so eloquently, but it's impossible to convey the hopelessness and desperation that one feels when they are held pre-trial. When you're sitting in a jail cell and you know that if you had the money, you could walk free. And for me, that really hit me when I was sitting in a jail cell and I had a cellmate who was there because she was in the midst of an addiction. And she was held for 4 months because she didn't have the $500 that it took to get her freedom. And I would hear her every day desperately talking to her family, begging them to get this money together. And me and her really bonded over that 4 months. And finally her charges were dismissed and she was able to go home. And shortly after she went home, I found out last year, because I social media, I was like, I really want to find this girl. Like we had so many deep talks about what we wanted for our futures, the dreams that we had. And I was really in a position where I was realizing my dreams, and I just wanted to reach out to her because if she wasn't doing the same, I wanted to help her. And shortly after she was released, way back in 2009, she overdosed and passed away. And I think about the fact that had she not spent those 4 months in jail, maybe she could have gotten the help that she truly needed, because jails and prisons aren't set up to support individuals. They aren't set up to give you the resources and the help, whether it's mental health treatment, whether it's addiction, whether it's you need reconciliation with your family. And we are in a position right now where we can end this unjust system. We are in a position where we can tear down these walls and actually support people when they come home, instead of stigmatizing them and, not allowing them to get jobs, not allowing them access to living spaces. We can do better. And I think that this panel and all of us together, us at the Bail Project, you at Safe and Just, Ellie, you're doing it. We are in a unique position where we can actually change this system. And we talk about empathy, and it's really easy to sympathize with someone who's in jail. It's easy to feel sorry for somebody who is held pretrial and on cash bail. But we need to make that bridge to empathize, to actually put ourselves in the shoes of someone who is living in poverty, who is in jail and simply cannot afford their freedom. And like Twyla said, we at the Bail Project believe that freedom should be free. And so today is a day to really highlight the injustice, not only of cash bail, because empathy is so much bigger. We need to be reaching people who are sitting in jail, not only pre-trial, but everyone that's sitting in those 4 walls. I just remember how I felt when I was inside. And for years, like I couldn't get a handle. I couldn't accept the fact that like it was going to be a while before I came home. And what was my life going to look like? And that is a question that hits everyone when they're inside. What is my life going to look like after I am released? Because over 90% of the people who are sitting in prisons are going to come home. And what is their life going to look like? And how are we as a community going to accept them and support them?
I know you probably see situations like this almost every day working with the Bail Project. What are kind of the overall implications or things you've drawn from the impacts of pretrial incarceration for all these people that you've worked with?
So we have helped over 15,000 people. We have 24 sites across the country. We've posted nearly $30 million in bails. And what I've seen as a bail disruptor in Detroit is that it is not money that brings people back to court. It is support that brings people back to court. It is transportation, because so many people, they struggle. And if you live in Detroit and it's winter time and it takes 3 buses to get to court, you might miss one of those court dates. And now you're in a position where there's a warrant out for your arrest and you may be rearrested. And I saw that time and time again. I saw mothers who didn't have adequate childcare, who had to go to court over and over again, missing work and having to take care of their children, and they missed court. So it isn't what bail was historically designed for. It meant that if you had skin in the game, you would come back to court. But that's a myth. We know that now. Our data shows that our clients go to 90% of their court dates. And the barriers are what we are trying to support our clients with. And I also, just to bring it back to a client story, I had a client who was in school, and this is kind of reminiscent of Sarah's story. Sarah wanted to finish her senior year of high school. And had she not been able to get help out the Bail Project, she would not have been able to complete her senior year of high school. And so what I see is clients who get out, they are able to go on with their lives, keep their jobs, keep their homes, keep custody of their children. And that's all that we just don't want jail to be a place where people are losing their livelihoods. And I've seen people over and over again lose everything because of 3, 4, 5 nights in jail. So imagine what it's like to sit in jail for months. It's a travesty.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the research, there's so many places across the country that have gotten rid of cash bail, and they haven't had appearance rates change very much at all. And so I think your data is borne out in the research from places that have gotten rid of cash bail. Ellie, you ran in Washtenaw County on a platform that included eliminating most cash bail. What drew you to this issue originally, and in kind of a national climate where sometimes this is controversial, how did you get to winning and using this as part of your platform?
So thank you. And first of all, one correction: I categorically oppose cash bail. So I ran on never seeking cash bail, and we haven't since I've been prosecutor. I came to this position from what I think is something of an unorthodox background for a county prosecutor. I was a civil rights and public interest lawyer. And before that, I was an 8th grade public school teacher. And the reason that I ran for prosecutor is because through my work over and over again, I saw how the criminal legal system sits at the center of so much cascading injustice and inequity that goes far beyond what's happening in the criminal legal system itself. And, cash bail is perhaps the most prominent example of that. I couldn't say it any better than Sarah and Asia already have, but when you are sitting in jail pre-trial simply because you cannot afford to pay to get out, think about the cascading consequences on that person and on that person's family. The data shows that if you're sitting in jail and you're poor or working class, you work a shift job perhaps, if you're sitting in jail pre-trial for even a day or two, you are quite likely to lose your job. What happens when you lose your job? You're likely to lose your home, your housing. Your kids may be homeless, may have to live with relatives. And very likely your kids are going to have to switch schools in the middle of the year as a result of that housing insecurity. And what does the data show us? The data shows us that even in the best of circumstances, kids switching schools in the middle of the year results in about 6 months of academic loss. So we're not just talking about the person who's sitting behind bars and the effects on that person. There are families, there are children whose lives are irreparably changed by the fact that a provider or a loved one is sitting in jail simply because of poverty. We also can't ignore the racial elements of this. Cash bail is a straightforwardly wealth-based discrimination tool. What cash bail means is that if you have money, you get to go free. But if you are poorer, you don't. It expressly discriminates on the basis of wealth. What have we done in this country for 400 plus years? We have prevented through racist policies Black people and Black families from accumulating wealth. It started with slavery and the literal theft of labor from Black people. It continued through Jim Crow and the laws that were in place that prevented Black folks from obtaining jobs, from securing an adequate education, from getting housing. The racist redlining policies that the government instituted throughout the 20th century prevented Black homeownership. And what we know is that homeownership is the single biggest driver of generational wealth in the United States of America. So when you layer on a wealth-based classification on top of this history, it discriminates straightforwardly on the basis of race, and none of us should find that acceptable. Now, in terms of how, I ran my campaign and I won on never seeking cash bail. The truth of the matter is that there is a lot of misinformation out there around what bail is. And I think a lot of that is intentional, and it comes from those who have a vested interest, financial interest, in keeping our cash bail system. So I sat at my dining room table because we were campaigning during COVID, so I couldn't go door to door, and I just called voters and we had conversations. And many of them had heard that I opposed cash bail and expressed some concern. Doesn't that just mean that you're letting everybody out? Doesn't that just mean that there's no punishment for crime? And my answer was no. In fact, let's talk about what cash bail really is. And the truth of the matter is, when you break it down and when people understand what bail is and understand that what it fundamentally does is, as Twyla said at the start, imposes two systems of justice, one for wealthy people and one for poor and working class people. Very few people find that acceptable. So it's about having these conversations, talking about the cascading adverse effects of cash bail, and talking to people openly about what we can put in its place. That's what we're doing in Washtenaw County. We're moving beyond a wealth-based system of pretrial detention. And that's what I'm hopeful the country is going to go. And I'm very optimistic, given what we've seen in sort of recent days and months, that this snowball effect is going to pick up speed, and we're going to see meaningful bail reform across the United States.
Have you had any backlash or any problems in implementing your policy changes so far? I know you've only been in for a little while, but
I've been in for a little over 2 months, and you of course get the people that still, frankly, I'll just call it like it is, don't really understand what bail is, and say, well, aren't you letting all the murderers and the rapists out, and aren't you saying that there's no punishment? And that's something that we can have conversations about. In terms of implementation, it's really gone pretty smoothly so far. And I want to be clear about this. We're not seeking cash bail, period, in Washtenaw County. That doesn't mean that for the very dangerous people who pose a threat to the community that we're not seeking pretrial detention. I do think that there are people that, by their actions have demonstrated that they pose an imminent risk to the community, and we've got to look out for public safety first and hold them pretrial. But money shouldn't be the reason that you're held or whether you're free, right? Whether you're poor or wealthy, if you pose a threat, I don't want you back out there. It makes no more sense to hold somebody who's poor in jail pending trial when they don't pose a danger than it does to let a wealthy person who may pose a very serious danger back out simply because they have money. So we've been able to find ways and make these arguments before judges to keep the dangerous people detained or to impose pretrial conditions that ensure public safety. But we've been able largely to do so in a way that takes somebody's wealth off the table. It's just 2 months in, of course, but we're grateful that, the bail project is working closely in Washtenaw County with our public defender's office and is making sure that people have the resources to show back up to court hearings. We have a great set of partners here in Washtenaw County in terms of the judges, in terms of law enforcement, in terms of our public defender's office. So by and large, there's always hiccups in implementation, but it has gone smoothly so far. And that reflects, frankly, what we see across the country when states and jurisdictions move past a wealth-based system of pretrial detention.
Okay, Phil, what drew your office and Representative LaGrand to the issue of bail reform?
Hi, everyone. First, I apologize for clearly being on the road. We had hoped to be in the office by now, but had a flat tire, so a little bit stressed out here. But glad that we could make it. And I want to thank Safe and Just Michigan and the Bail Project for really spreading the news about this important issue in people's and families' lives. Also want to thank Sarah for sharing her story. I know how brave that is, and to hear from people who were impacted by this unjust system, so that today was billed as a day of empathy. And I think it's easy to get caught behind the statistics of 41% of people in county jail right now are there on pretrial detention. But I think it's really important that we see the real human toll that this system takes on people. More eloquent than Ellie on this issue, and certainly can't be as eloquent as David if he could be here. He sends his regrets He is in Judiciary Committee right now, so obviously couldn't make this time. What got our office engaged in this, what got Representative LaGrand engaged in this issue was his own personal experience on both sides, both as a Kent County Assistant Prosecutor and as a criminal defense attorney. And he was able to see with his clients just how unjust this system is that Ellie and Asia and Sarah described. That when you lay it out to people, is so clearly a system based not on the presumption of innocence, not on danger to self and society, but very simply based on wealth. And that was a system that clearly needs to change. And those are what for Representative LaGrand throughout his tenure in Lansing. The bill package that we put together is a bipartisan bill package, as it would have to be. We have divided government in Michigan for part of David's term. That was not divided government, that was a full Republican government. Now we have divided government, and nothing is going to move out of the House and Senate and get to the governor's desk unless it is a bipartisan bill package. And I'll be honest with you, that makes it less than perfect, but does make it something that moves the needle significantly forward to have a real impact on people's lives. So as Josh mentioned, this has been a package of bills that David introduced in his first term and in his second term, and we have continued to see progress towards getting this a hearing, getting this a vote out of committee, and getting this to the floor. We continue to be optimistic which is sometimes tough because it really is something that he's very passionate about. And we really are anxious and eager to help as many people as we possibly can. But this is going to take an effort that can't just happen, in the House office building and in the Capitol. It's going to have to be a movement that encourages people to come together in the Capitol, Republicans and Democrats, and pass a package that improves people's lives. So we anticipate that we are continuing to work with groups like Safe and Just, and with all the stakeholders involved in this issue, to refine our bills, to find the sweet spot where it can actually become law and help the most people possible. We anticipate that we'll be able to bring something forward in late March or in April.
That's great to hear. Are there any particular parts of the legislation that you'd like to highlight, or anything that you'd like to talk about as kind of like the goals of what you're trying to accomplish?
The basics of the goals are to prevent exactly what we heard from the other speakers, which is that people people who do not pose a danger to themselves or their community will have a speedy determination of what bail should be. The judges are informed about if there is a presumption of a personal recognizance bond and no cash bail, and that if a cash bail is imposed, that the amount of cash bail itself not be what keeps people in jail. So this skin in the game argument, if it continues, would be one where judges are aware about the available cash that people have and set a cash bond level at a rate that is affordable and ensures what we're trying to reach here, which is that people continue to show up for their court dates. But it's remarkably important here that we're talking about reasonable bail if bail is imposed, although again, the presumption would be non-bail on most non-dangerous crimes for non-dangerous people, and that there would be ability to appeal that bond, and that the entire process happens extraordinarily quickly so that people don't languish in jail for days, weeks, and months, which is what we're really trying to fight here, is the impacts that it has on people who are presumed innocent and the families that they have. So that's some of what we're talking about. Inform judges, prosecutors that need to make a case if they're going to make a case for cash bond, but a clear presumption that we're working towards personal recognizance.
So here's a question that I'd like to hear, what everybody thinks about this, because I think Ellie actually raised this as kind of one of the hot parts. No matter if we can all agree on that cash bail is a bad idea, one of the hot parts, the harder parts to discuss, is how you determine, or if you should try to determine, dangerousness in relation to the presumption of pretrial innocence. Megan Stevenson and Sandra Mason in a recent law review article said purely preventative detention is a fixture of governance, yet despite hundreds of years of practice, the law provides little guidance about what type and degree of risk justifies a complete deprivation of liberty. This lack has become more salient with the spread of pretrial risk assessment, because a jurisdiction that adopts statistical tools must explicitly decide what risk threshold divides those who may warrant preventative detention from those who do not. And how to determine risk and dangerousness is one of the biggest questions facing kind of how you do bail reform. And there's a lot of questions about if it's racially discriminatory and a lot of other things. So I'd kind of like to hear people's thoughts on both this, on if, what we should do with the kind of idea of dangerousness, and what do we think about risk assessments. Anyone can jump in first and just kind of round robin this one.
I'll start, I guess. So I'm generally quite skeptical of algorithmic risk assessment tools for a couple of reasons. Number one, the truth of the matter is you can have two crimes that are both charged the same way. They're both violations of the same law, but the factual circumstances underlying those crimes are very, very, very different. And I don't know of an algorithmic risk tool that can take into stock the various circumstances that surrounded a previous crime or the instant crime the same as a human being can. The other thing is, the criticisms around algorithmic risk assessment tools writ large being racially discriminatory, I think have a lot of validity to them, because what we know historically is that, minority neighborhoods, as well as, people of color, have been over policed. And just take one example, which, per the ACLU, in Michigan, Black people and white people are about equally likely to use marijuana. But before marijuana was legalized in 2018, people of color were about 4.7 times, if I'm remembering right, more likely to be arrested than white people for marijuana use than Black people. So if you loop that into an algorithmic risk tool, right, and you say, well, here's a criminal history and an arrest record related to marijuana, you are just building on top of that racially disproportionate enforcement scheme, a risk assessment that will determine somebody's freedom. So I'm very skeptical and generally don't like algorithmic risk assessment tools for that reason. So then the question is what do you do? And I'll tell you what we do in my office when we're deciding whether we're going to seek either stringent non-monetary conditions that will likely result in somebody being held or categorical pretrial detention for a particular charge, is we look through everything. We look at the facts of the case. We look at the history. There are certain types of behaviors that, we have real concerns about whether somebody is going to pose a danger. One key example is if it's relational violence. If somebody has a escalating history of domestic abuse and then commits a very serious assaultive crime against an intimate partner, that's something that should really raise alarm bells. If somebody is, jumping out of the street and assaulting somebody, that probably indicates they're a broader danger to the public, which is very different than if somebody gets in a fight with somebody at a family barbecue, even though, that assaultive crime may be charged the same way. So I really think at the end of the day, you need the human element. You need to look at all factors. You can't just rely on computer-based algorithmic models. Now, that means that you need people who are actually firmly committed to ensuring the least restrictive conditions necessary to ensure public safety in prosecutors' offices and in judicial seats. There's no way around that. You've got to build the culture up around the sort of presumption of pretrial release if somebody doesn't pose a danger. I'm grateful that here in Washtenaw County, at least in my office, we really do have that. We have very thoughtful assistant prosecuting attorneys, and we've been working to change the culture and provide people background on the history of cash bail and how it can harm communities and how in the long term it actually keeps us less safe. But if you're going to rely on human beings, you've got to make sure that those human beings are, properly incentivized and that their boss isn't going to come down on them if something unexpected happens. Because the truth of the matter is, we're making predictions here, but we're not clairvoyant. There are going to be circumstances without a cash bail system in which people are let out on a personal recognizance crime or bond and commit another crime. We just have to own that. There are circumstances now in which people are let out on cash bail and commit another crime. So nothing is a panacea. And, we need to, frankly, elect prosecutors and elect judges who aren't going to be afraid of that one isolated incident that, the media may seize on in the headlines and derail the entire project, but take a look at the whole context of the circumstances and really internalize the idea that somebody shouldn't be held pre-trial simply because of how much money they have or unless they pose a real serious danger to the community.
One thing I've learned over years of reading information about this is, our tendency is when someone gets out and recidivates, that we look at just that case in a vacuum. And in place after place after place, we found, New Jersey, California, Philadelphia, DC, we've seen bail reform happen, and the overall recidivism rate declined compared to the rate before the reform. And so I think it's really, really incredibly important that people understand that we shouldn't be looking at cases in a vacuum. We should be comparing the statistics before reform and after reform. And if we don't do it that way, we're potentially cheating ourselves of a much better system. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to say about risk assessments or dangerousness?
I can speak to that a little bit. Although again, I want to just note that I'm speaking as myself and not, and if you don't like what I say, don't blame David. If you like what I say, that I am speaking for David. I think one of the things that our package does is make sure, Ellie talks about the importance of the human element. Obviously, we want judges to be informed. So we need to make sure that that their offices have the resources necessary to bring all of the information to them. And that's going to take some work, as with all things that need resources. But what our package does is require that a judge state the reason for why, if they determine that it's vital because of community safety or because of risk of non-appearance, that bail has to be set again at this reasonable level. They must, on the record, state the reasons why they think that's the case. Since they do that, that is also, creates a system where their judgment is appealable, We now know that we have a much more robust indigent defense system in Michigan. And so we believe that this will help ensure that when humans are making these decisions, right, when judges predominantly are making these decisions, that they are not simply pulling numbers out of thin air, sometimes based on what they believe will be the likely future fine if that person is found guilty, but that they must justify the decisions that they make. Are willing to go along with this idea. It might slow things down a little bit, but it will ensure that we have a system of checks and balances that make sure that any cash bond that is imposed is appealable and reasonable.
Sarah, a lot of people, as we've just been talking about, kind of push back against bail reform because of kind of the fear that when people get out, they'll immediately commit crimes. What would you say to these people having experienced a lot of this firsthand?
I just want to say, who are we to say that someone is going to do something one more time because they did it one time? Before June of 2020, I had never been in trouble with the police, ever, not once. I haven't never gotten pulled over, never got a traffic violation. I haven't even gotten into a fist fight that resulted in a police officer coming. So if everyone was to think, oh, well, you committed a crime once, you're going to do it again, I would just ask them, well, did you not see my school records? All of the A's that I've been receiving in school, all of the awards that I got in school, and all of the teachers that advocate for me, telling everyone that this student is a great student. There's so many people out here who assume that once a bad person or once a criminal, always a criminal, because you can never really define who a criminal is until you've met who this person is and you've gotten to know them and their intentions. A lot of the people who are held pre-sentences, they get out on cash bail and do right. They take that opportunity to do better. They take that opportunity to make sure they get to court and make sure they can do this and make sure they can do that. But if as a society, we're just going to keep on pressuring them and keep on telling them that, oh, you're not good enough to be out here with us. You deserve to be locked up. You're a criminal. You don't deserve freedom. Things like that, saying things like that will push a person to not be better. Mentally, hearing the same thing over and over from the same person, different people, a group of people, it really makes you reflect on yourself and really think like, maybe I am this person that they're saying that I am. And even if it doesn't go that way, it could go the complete opposite way. And they could say, okay, well, since nobody believes in me, I give up and I'm gonna just do what they telling me that I'm gonna do. Sometimes we have to just, as a people, as a country, as a state, as a community, we have to give people a chance to do better. If I wouldn't have gotten out and I wouldn't have been able to complete my senior year, which I am completing now, I graduate in June. If I wouldn't have got this opportunity, thank you, I would have literally felt completely done with everything. High school has been my biggest challenge. And I promised myself in elementary school that I would graduate, get a job, go to college, make a career. All of these things would be things that I wouldn't be able to do if people were just constantly trying to make me out to be this criminal. It's so many things that comes with the justice system and being brought back into society. I wasn't in there for long, thank God. I was not in there for too long. But for me, it felt like an eternity. It felt like I was going to be in there forever. It felt like I didn't have anything. It felt like I wasn't going to do anything with my life. I thought that all of my plans were just poof, gone. But once I got out, I told myself, I told everybody that once I get home, I'm gonna all A's this year. I'm gonna get a job that's paying at least $15 an hour. I'm going to a vocational school in August of this year. And then once I get out of that vocational school, I'm going to Wayne State University right afterwards. All of these things are things that would not have been accomplished if society didn't give me the opportunity to do it. All of that to say, if you don't give people the opportunity, they will never do better. They will never do better. Anyone who is constantly being told the negative things about themselves, either they're going to be because it takes a lot. It takes a lot to hear negative and still push out positive. If you can do that, I commend you, because I can barely do it. It's so hard to be around negativity and hear constant negativity and do better. You have to have some type of positivity, some type of light to let you know that there is a light at the end of this tunnel. There's no way to completely eliminate crime, because stealing a grape is a crime. And a lot of crimes have been committed out of need, not justifying it at all, but I can understand it. I can definitely understand it. Because when you are out here and you don't have anything, the only thing that you can think of is, how can I get this? And if nobody is helping you, the only thing in your mind is to just take. You're going to feel terrible about it. And I believe that people feel terrible about it, but you have no other way to live. It's the same thing as a mentality thing. If you have nothing to look forward to, nobody pushing you to do better, there's no way to do better. And I'm just gonna say it. If I would have been locked up and everybody was pushing me back to that place, I would have been back to that place. And as strong as I know I am, it's not that much strength in the world to make me feel like everything that I do is going to be justified when nobody is backing me. And if anybody is doing it, again, I commend you, because I'm strong, but I am not that strong. And I need somebody in my corner, which is why the Bell Project has helped me so much, because Asia has been there for me every step of the way. From the time that she interviewed me while I was sitting in a cell to the time that I got out and she brought me my first gift card and bag of clothes. Nobody understands how much it helps to have somebody backing you. Having somebody to really tell you they believe in you and they think that you're going to be able to do it is the biggest thing to help you actually make this transition from incarceration to society. It's not an easy thing to go through, and I don't wish it on anyone. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But when you have a support system as strong as I do, you have no choice but to do better. You have no choice but to want better. All I want is for everybody to have that opportunity. If you want to do better, you deserve that opportunity. Everyone does. Whether you're locked up or not, if you think that you can do better and you want to do better, if I have to make a social media post so that people can reach out to me, I would, because it's so hard to do things without support. It's near impossible, honestly. And honestly, we just need to do better as a society and make sure that we let people know that just because you made one mistake, that does not define you. It doesn't. If someone was to look up my name right now, the only thing they would see is the mistake that I made, the mistake that I didn't even know that I was making, because that's what society wants to see me as now. But I won't stand for that. And I don't think anyone else should either. I think that we should all take our opportunities and we should all make sure that before we look at anyone else to judge, we should just look in the mirror and know that you're a human being, I'm a human being. We are entitled to make mistakes, and we won't stop making mistakes just because someone is telling us that we made a mistake. That's just the point of living, is to live and learn. You make mistakes, but that is proof that you are trying. And all you can do is try.
Thanks for that, Sarah. And I know all of us are looking forward to a couple years from now when you're graduating from Wayne State. So we'll all be giving you big ups on that. Asia, we've seen some backlash against bail funds like the Bail Project because of kind of incidents like we talked about before, and also some people who had unpopular crimes getting out because of the Bail Project or other bail funds. What do you say to people who oppose bail funds on these grounds, and why are bail funds so important? Although Sarah just explained, I think, pretty well why that's true.
I think Sarah just answered that question. But
more detail is always good, you know.
Yeah, bail funds are an immediate solution to like a problem that seems very permanent. We at the Bail Project are giving clients like a lifeline. We're giving them what they deserve in the first place. And if we want to uphold the Constitution and fix this constitutional crisis, which is also a humanitarian crisis, bail funds are needed until we can disrupt this system and end this system. It just, like when we talked about algorithmic risk assessments, like those reduce a person to a statistic, and cash bail reduces human beings to a dollar amount. And there's no place on this earth where that is right. So when people push back on bail funds, you're actually upholding you're upholding racism, you're upholding these racial disparities and the criminalization of poverty. And that is not okay, which is why like what Ellie is doing, what Gascon is doing, what the state of Illinois is doing, just running with the momentum that we already have right now. And just if people can't get on this train to end cash bail, like we're ending it, it's happening. And all we can do is like show people like Sarah, people who are doing great things, people who are graduating high school, going to college, going to vocational schools. The majority of our clients get out and they do not do anything else. They do not get rearrested. And the majority of our clients, either their charges are reduced dramatically or their charges are dismissed altogether, because we know that when you have a chance to fight your case from a position of freedom, the likelihood that your charges are dismissed goes up exponentially. And so these bail funds are needed right now. They are needed. They are the lifeline for people who are sitting in jail pre-trial. And we can't predict the future. Like Ellie said, we are not clairvoyant. We cannot. Humans are going to make mistakes. People are going to make decisions out of need, out of poverty, out of lack of education, lack of opportunity. And if we're not giving people the chance to be successful, we're setting them up to fail. And so bail funds like the Bail Project are the thing that is setting people up to be successful, and they're needed.
Ellie, some people who are maybe even listening to this conversation are still skeptics. What's something when you're talking to someone who's got a lot of skepticism about kind of the getting rid of cash bail and bail reform? What do you tell them? You say you're on calls with folks like this all the time.
Well, first of all, I break it down. I say, let's start by talking about what cash bail is. Cash bail is a system in which if you are poor or working class and you are accused of even a non-dangerous offense, you can be held in jail for days or weeks or months simply because you can't afford to pay to get out. At the same time, a cash bail-based system means that if you are wealthy and you do pose a serious danger to the community, you're going to be able to go free simply because you have money in your bank account. I start by framing it that way. And no matter what side of the equation you come from, that doesn't sit right with most people. Most people just intuitively don't think that you should have a different justice system simply because you have money in this country. And so if you start by framing it that way, I think you're able to have a conversation. And once you have the conversation, I think people come over to our side. But I gotta say too, what we really need more of is more Sarahs. Because if you look at the backlash to bail reform, it is propagated by sensationalistic Willie Horton style journalism. Look at what happened in New York. Right? You had the New York Post, the New York Daily News, two tabloids. After bail reform went into effect, they started blaming every single crime in the city of New York, which has 8.5 million people. There's going to be crime there. There's always been crime there. Every crime was the fault of bail reform, right? Now, I can quote the statistics. It was not true. In fact, in a city of 8.5 million people, only 83 of the crimes in that entire city were committed by people who were out on pretrial release. Many of them may have been able to make bail anyway, right? So 83 out of 8.5 million people is a tiny fraction, but ultimately that's not what gets people. What gets people is the stories. What gets people is the humanity. And the opponents of bail reform, they use fear as a tactic. I think the only way to fight fear is with stories of hope, like Sarah's. If you look at every successful presidential campaign in this country, over the past century, they have been based on one of two things: fear or hope. We can fight fear with hope, but that means centering the human beings, lifting up stories like Sarah's, applauding and spotlighting folks that have the courage to come forward and share their stories of how they've been impacted by pretrial detention and how organizations like the Bail Project help them get on the right path. That's not easy. And Sarah, I just want to commend you again, because for exactly the reason you say. I know it's not easy to come on here and talk about the fact that you were arrested. Most people just would prefer to get that behind them, but it's important to lift up those voices and those stories of hope and redemption and rehabilitation, and to counter the fear-based narrative with those individual human stories. That is how we're going to win.
And before we get to some questions and answers, Phil, quickly, could you talk about when people should expect Representative LaGrand's package to start maybe moving again or get reintroduced, and how can people help out in that effort?
We expect to put this package back again this month or in April. Again, we're working with a variety of groups, especially with the Supreme Court Administrative Office. So, that's the Supreme Court. We're working with all the stakeholders, from prosecutors to criminal defense attorneys, to organizations like who we have here, and the impacted community. So we are working again to find the best possible legislative fix to this that can become law. And that's what we find to be the most important thing here, is we've got to find something that can pass both of these chambers and get signed into law, because people simply can't wait. We have a lot of great prosecutors out there. Obviously, you can see how Ali won his election. He's a clearly passionate speaker who knows this issue backwards and forwards. Makes me wish I was still in Washtenaw County. So that's that's the timing that we can expect. As far as how people can help, again, it's, I want to echo what Ali said. It's getting as many people as possible. The Sarahs that are out there by the hundreds every day, the thousands every day, to share their story, because Ellie's right. The people that make money off of this system want to ensure that they use fear, and that they use small anecdotal evidence to give to support themselves financially, that they make money off of this system, off of this unjust system. So we need to uplift people's voices, and we need to do that, across this state, but especially in Lansing, where our elected representatives will be, hopefully voting on this. So I think probably the most immediate thing that can be done is speaking with your local representative and with the members of the Judiciary Committee, especially Representative Graham Filler, who is the chair of the committee, and ask, I think very respectfully, for a hearing for these bills. Once we get to a hearing, then we try to ask respectfully for a vote. And then we get it to the floor, and we ask the speaker and representatives to bring it up for a vote on the floor. This is, there are a lot of things in Lansing which I weren't the case, but Schoolhouse Rock was correct. It's a long process, and Bill got dragged back and forth through that Capitol, if you remember. It's a process where we cannot give up. We cannot silence ourselves because we lose the optimism that we need to have to bring this forward. Other states have been successful at doing significant reforms, and Michigan can too. It's just going to take a combination of a grassroots effort and a legislative effort.
Okay, well, before we get to questions, I just want to take this chance, because I'll forget later, to thank all of you for being such an amazing panel and helping us kick off the Day of Empathy in incredible style this morning. So let's get to some questions from our audience. First one, how can we be sure that what we put in place of cash bail doesn't continue the harm to Black people and to poor communities? Anyone can take a stab at that.
I think that where we start is really putting the power in the hands of the community. The Bail Project's motto is community release with support. We don't replace cash bail with algorithmic risk assessments. We don't replace cash bail with ankle monitors or electronic monitoring. What we replace it with is letting people go, but also connecting them to resources in their community that will help them and set them up for success.
Someone asked about Illinois, and I think we probably should celebrate that Illinois did just pass bail reform, and by 2023, I believe they'll be without cash bail in the state of Illinois. The governor signed it. I think Phil already answered this to some extent, but the question is, how close are we to doing the same? And Phil, do you want to just take a quick stab at that?
Well, just like Ellie and Asia said, I am not clairvoyant, so I can't predict, where this is going to go. I feel like I'm not telling too many tales out of school if I could say that we were fairly close to this package being voted out of committee and going to the floor in the last lame duck session of 2020. Unfortunately, Rudy Giuliani came to town, spread COVID around, and we had a week's delay in the House, and that made it impossible because of rules about things passing in the House and then passing in the Senate that made it impossible to do it in lame duck. So we have been remarkably close from time to time at getting this passed. We have, the support of many, if not most or all of the stakeholders involved. So again, we are mostly looking for a hearing and a vote in this in committee and on the floor. Those are decisions that are beyond our control because Representative LaGrand is a Democrat, and that is the minority party in the House and the Senate. So we are reliant on the people that hold the gavels in committee and on the floor to bring these up for a vote. We believe if they come up for a vote that they will pass out of committee and out of the floor and go over to the Senate. So we just need the opportunity to do that. But I am not in control of the agenda and the committee and the floor. Neither is Representative LaGrand. So we have to keep pushing is the most important, I think, advice that I can give to people about what they can do to make this a reality in Michigan.
Here's a really honest kind of foundational question I think Ellie might be best positioned to answer. Does Michigan have all cash bail, or are some counties offering alternatives, since I think you're one of the counties offering alternatives?
Yeah. And so in Washtenaw County, from the prosecutor's office's perspective, we do not seek cash bail in any case. In every case that we charge, we fill out a bond recommendation form, and I'll be clear, it's a recommendation form, and the judge ultimately makes the determination. But we fill out a bond recommendation form which recommends whatever non-monetary conditions we think are appropriate to ensure public safety. And our mantra in the prosecutor's office is we want the least restrictive conditions possible to ensure public safety. And Asia and Twyla know this because they were on our bail working group. But we've actually got a pretty exhaustive document which details, along with examples, where we might seek certain pretrial conditions of release and where those are inappropriate. But at the end of the day, we've tried to take cash bail off the table entirely, and we don't seek wealth-based detention in Washtenaw County anymore. So that's the model that we're working off of. It's working within the existing strictures of the law. I'm of course fully supportive of broader legislative bail reform efforts, and I applaud the work that Representative LaGrand and Phil are doing in the legislature as a first step. But we're doing what we can do within the existing legal structure, but we're not seeking cash bail at all in Washtenaw County anymore. And if you're interested in sort of how we're doing this, I'd refer people, and I can drop the link in the chat, to our cash bail policy, and especially you might want to take a look at the examples at the end of it, where we sort of flesh out the sort of considerations that we're thinking about when we fill out those bond recommendation forms.
Asia or Sarah, a couple of people have asked similar questions about how they might be able to help with be volunteers with the bail project, or to help in other ways with things around this issue. If you all have some thoughts on that.
We always welcome volunteers, interns. You can go to volunteer@bailproject.org, and there's a form that you fill out in whatever city you're in across the country. If we're in that jurisdiction, we will definitely welcome you with open arms. There are things that clients need that there's actually a void. Clothing. Clients, if you've lost your job and you have court dates coming up, well, pre-COVID, and you had to go to court, men would need suits or nice ties, or just clothing. Food pantries, there aren't enough of those anymore. After you've been in jail, you need to find a job if you've lost your job, and putting dinner on the table is difficult. Just the simple life necessities that clients need. Gift cards, we give those to our clients, but gift cards only go so far. Clients need real support after they've been released, and hopefully they're able to get that from their communities that they live in. And mental health services, maybe they need transportation to places that are outside of our range. Just things like that volunteers can help with. And again, visit volunteer@bailproject.org, and we will definitely call you and see how we can work together to support our clients.
Here's a really good question. As communities look toward adjusting to bail reforms, a concern may be that community-based substance treatment, mental health, and other providers may lack the capacity to meet the needs of people who are now being de-institutionalized. Are there best practices or technical assistance developed to help communities make these adaptations to their systems to provide adequate community-based support? That's a really good question.
So for us, one of our partners is Dawn Farm in Ypsilanti. And for clients who are struggling with substance use or mental health needs, we refer them to Dawn Farm. But what Megan and I did was we gave a training to the Dawn Farm staff for just what it's like to work with somebody who's firmly incarcerated, who's just leaving jail. So any of the partners that we partner with, that we give as a resource to our clients, we go in and we do these trainings. We make sure that they have the tools in their toolkit that they need to actually support our clients. That is a really good, that community-based solutions are not in abundance, but we do what we can to make sure that we're setting our clients up to be as successful as they can be.
And this question is for Ellie. This from our Facebook Live listeners. First, I'm so glad to see you in office because we need the change that you're going to help bring. Here is my question. I went to jail and prison a number of times as a result of my heroin use disorder. When the police arrested me, I generally got high bails and went through withdrawal in jail. How are you managing people who get arrested who have severe substance use disorders?
That's a great question. And, the truth of the matter is we don't want folks that are dealing with what I believe is fundamentally a health issue to be going to jail in the first place. And I say we because this isn't just me, and I've got to give a lot of credit to our partners here in Washtenaw County. The Washtenaw Sheriff's Office has been working for probably a couple of years now on a program called Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion and Deflection, or LEAD. And under that model, if somebody is coming through the system, but they're dealing with a underlying substance use issue, instead of bringing charges, we will hold the charges in the prosecutor's office. They'll be connected to resources, connected to services, and we'll sort of track them as they move throughout that process. But in lieu of using jail as a rehabilitation measure, we allow them to get the support that they need in the community. This has been in the works for, like I said, a couple of years now. It is actually in front of the county commission tomorrow for a full vote, though it passed unanimously through their Ways and Means Committee. So I'm hopeful that we'll finally get it off the ground tomorrow. But that's how we need to be dealing fundamentally with substance use issues. The truth of the matter is we are over-reliant on jails and prisons as a means to address what is fundamentally a health issue, which is totally illogical and counterproductive. We wouldn't say to somebody who had a broken leg, go to jail because the jail has the best resources to fix your broken leg. But mental health issues, substance use issues, those are health issues just like a broken leg. And, I'm proud that we're going to begin moving beyond that in Washtenaw County, because bail or no bail, we shouldn't be criminalizing what are fundamentally health issues.
We got a couple questions that I'm going to kind of put together about kind of bipartisanship and the need to move people on the right. One is, how can we get people on the right more involved in this? And the second is, would it be possible to do nonpartisan petition drives that support bail reform? Would that be helpful for getting legislation passed in Lansing? I guess either Phil or Ellie could deal with that one.
I can start, and then Phil can jump in, I guess. If somebody wants to do a nonpartisan petition drive and get something on the ballot, I think that'd be great. Ultimately, to totally eliminate cash bail in the state of Michigan, we probably need a constitutional amendment. And that may be best suited through a ballot drive. Now there will be a lot of persuasion in that if we're going to get something through on a petition drive, much less to ultimately get it to victory at the polls through a ballot initiative, and that does take reaching out to folks that are more conservative. I guess I'd just say a couple of things in talking to folks who are more conservative. Is number one, we can focus on the financial aspects of this. We spend a ton of money in this state on both jails and prisons. We spend a fifth of our general fund budget on prisons, and that doesn't count the $500 million, I think, on aggregate that we spend on jails. If in the long term we want to put our state in a more financially viable place, one way to look at that is making sure that we're only holding people in jail, particularly pre-trial, who really need to be there. We can talk later about where that money goes. Progressives may prefer for it to be reinvested in things like social services and early childhood education, whatever. And Republicans may have visions of tax cuts dancing in their heads. Fine. We can have that discussion down the road, but this is, in many ways, low-hanging fruit to make sure that in the long term we realize cost savings that come from needlessly jailing people who don't pose a danger to the community and haven't been convicted of anything yet. The other thing, again, I'll just reemphasize, Sarah and the stories of folks who were able to turn their lives around, and the stories of allowing people opportunities for redemption. For a lot of our conservative friends and colleagues, what motivates them is, a sense of faith and values that are based in the ideas of redemption. And there's something really powerful about, saying we are not going to perpetually punish somebody for making one mistake, and we're going to allow people an opportunity for redemption. But a bail system that holds people simply because they don't have money runs totally counter to that. So, and one thing I'll say too is this can be done. This cross-partisan conversation can be done. The only thing, and maybe I'm overstating things a little bit, and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but really one of the only things that we've been able to do in a bipartisan way in this state in the last couple of years has been massive criminal justice reform efforts. Bail's next up on the list, and I think we can get allies from our more conservative friends by speaking their language, by focusing on the financial aspects, by focusing on redemption. That's the alliance that got a whole package of expungement bills through the legislature this past fall, for example. And I think it's an alliance that we can rebuild if we find common ground on this issue.
Yeah, I think Ellie's exactly right. If we did go with the statewide proposal, it would have to be a constitutional amendment because bail is in the Constitution. I think it's extraordinarily important to make sure that this issue remains a bipartisan issue. If we are going to see movement on it in the state of Michigan, which is a purple state, it doesn't need to be a partisan issue. It hasn't been a partisan issue. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. Ellie's absolutely right. The primary significantly impactful, I don't want to insult anybody's other bills, but I think I should say criminal justice has been a hallmark of bipartisanship in Lansing over the last 2 years. Thanks to the previous speaker, and thanks to people like Graham Filler and Senator Lucido, who's now gone. We passed expungement, we passed raise the age, we passed civil asset forfeiture reform, we decriminalized many former misdemeanors. There's been significant work done. And Ellie is exactly right. There are many ways that you can be brought to being supportive of criminal justice reform broadly and bail reform specifically. The faith-based argument about redemption is very powerful with Republicans. As Ellie said, the budgetary argument is very powerful with everybody who has some spending priority or tax cut priority. In addition, the libertarian argument works very well here. We are essentially talking about the state incarcerating people who are innocent until proven guilty, if they are guilty. And Asia made a very powerful argument that people who are put into jail are far more willing to plead guilty, whatever their status may be, to any crime or to the highest charge crime. So we have found our argument, and Representative LaGrand's package is bipartisan. It's an 8-bill package. It has Republicans and Democrats who are the lead sponsors and who are co-sponsors. So that libertarian argument is very meaningful for people, that the state simply should not be locking people up without good cause. And then finally, the economic argument is very popular with our friends in the business community, who frankly, before the pandemic, wanted to make sure that their employees were not falling victim to this system, which meant that their restaurants and their businesses where these people are employed are not impacted by it. So there are a variety of roads that can lead you to support bail reform, and I welcome everyone to get on whatever road they need that gets them there. So please I think that there is strong support for it in the Democratic caucus. But I believe that there is significant support in the Republican caucus, and there are ways that they can be led to supporting this bill package.
So just a few quick, well, this next one's not necessarily quick, but a few last questions. Two things that people have raised are, what do you all think about problem-solving courts as an effective alternative? And also, what do you all think about electronic monitoring? And I imagine Asia and Ellie might be the best one for those. I don't know. I mean, I could probably talk about electronic monitoring because I was on one for 2 years, but
Sure. I can start. Problem solving. I'll start with problem solving courts. I think problem solving courts are a really good tool to deal with somebody who is has more serious substance use, mental health related issues. I don't view it as an alternative to cash bail or pretrial detention. It's an alternative largely to a carceral sentence. What happens with a problem-solving court is you are diverted away into a special program in which the prosecutors, the judge, defense counsel, your substance use provider in many cases are working collaboratively, and you get set up with a plan. You check in with the judge. It's a much more collaborative setting, and at the end of it, your charges can be dismissed with the prosecutor's consent. Side note, we have a policy that we always give consent if you complete that very demanding program. But it's not really an alternative, I don't think, to pretrial detention, because for the most part, the folks who are in problem-solving courts are likely people that are already out in the community and would be out under either a bail system or a no bail system. So it's really more of an alternative to a sort of jail sentence or a sort of more traditional disposition in the criminal legal system. Ankle monitoring, GPS tethers, those are really significant restrictions on liberty. They are. Now, we do use them sometimes, and we do recommend them sometimes in the prosecutor's office, which is because I would prefer to have somebody on a tether and at least be able to go to work and provide for their family than I would prefer to have them in jail, and we tend to use them in circumstances where there's an identifiable person that somebody poses a threat to, and we really want to keep them away from that victim. But I think that they should be used very sparingly. And one thing that troubles me about ankle monitors and tethers is how much they cost. The way that we have to fund them in the state of Michigan is essentially through user fees, which means that you can be paying like $10 a day for a GPS ankle monitor in some circumstances. I have literally no idea why.
I hate to break in here, but I personally, I've been out for like 7 or 8 years now, and I'm still paying off my ankle monitors.
I believe it. And look, what I always say is I don't understand why it costs so much. I'm not able to get a straight answer on this because I've got a GPS monitor right here. We all carry them around. This doesn't cost me $10 a day, and it can do a lot of other cool stuff like Snapchat. So I don't understand why these cost so much. I really think there's an opportunity if somebody wants to be disruptive and make one that's cheaper. I'd really like to pilot it in Washtenaw County. But then more fundamentally, I think, this gets to a whole broader issue, which is about how we as a state are funding our judicial system. And it's largely through user fees, which end up placing a lot of financial burden on people who may be in the criminal justice system to begin with, simply because they're poor. Now, that's something that really needs action on a state level, because we at a local level sort of are where we are, and the courts only have certain ways to pay for something. But that's, the user costs and fees related to our criminal legal system is something that I really think is the next big issue in criminal justice reform.
Asia, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Ellie hit the nail on the head with everything about the ankle monitors. As far as I've had clients who could not get a job because they had an ankle monitor on, whose kids were asking, Dad, Mom, what is that on your ankle? The stigma and the mental just the mental toll that it takes on you to know that you're still not free with this ankle monitor. It's just an extension of incarceration. You know, me and Sarah were talking yesterday, and she talked about not being able to go to the track around the corner from her home to go for a jog if she wants to, not being able to take a bath and like really like just self-soothe in any way. So it's the outside stigma, but it's also like the internal not being able to like feel free in your soul.
Hey, I wanted to make sure and end this up because I think one of the real big parts of this panel was Sarah. And so I just want to know if Sarah has any like last words she wants to leave everyone with before I pass it off to Rick and we close this thing up. And I want to thank everybody again for participating. I thought this was a great panel.
Well, if I could say anything, I would just say, guys, don't give up. It's gonna get easier. It won't always feel how it may feel right now. I know that if somebody would have told me that, I probably wouldn't believe them, but I'm living proof. And my mom is sitting right here, she could tell you. It was hard, and it got harder before it got easier. But now we're at the point where we can actually make actual changes and have actual results. And that's all you can hope for, results. And that's we need to get rid of the ankle monitors. Honestly, I have one right now. There are some people who need them, but as for crimes like the things, first time committers and the things that don't really matter, like marijuana, for instance, or stuff like that, there's certain things and certain restriction ankle monitors that just are not right. They're not necessary and they're not right, period. As far as Asia was saying, like, I literally cannot take a bubble bath. I couldn't take a bubble bath if I wanted to. I can't submerge this device in water, and if I do, that is $1,200 out of my money that I don't have. $1,200 that could have went towards anything, towards me getting a new apartment, my college fund, my future children's college fund. All of those are things that just it's harder with the monitor. And if you can get anything from my story and from my situation, just remember not to give up. That's the easiest thing that I can say. That's the most important thing to remember. Do not give up. Don't give up. No matter how hard it is now, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. No matter how long the tunnel is, that light is there. Just have to push through it, and you have to believe in yourself the way that I believe in all of you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Let me turn it over to my colleague, Rick, and read us out of this thing. Thanks for participating, everybody.
Thank you, Josh. Please do us a favor and answer our exit survey. Safe and Just Michigan and Dream Corps Justice, thank you for participating in today's event. We will be hosting more webinars down the line, so please keep an eye out throughout the spring and summer. On the screen, we have included several ways that you can keep in contact with Safe and Just Michigan, and we look forward to connecting with you soon. Thanks again for participating in today's panel.